on the publication of these reshuffled or completely reorganized governments until, Kusima, the head of state met recently, a few days ago, with all the members of the Sacred Union for the Nation. It was during a first visit to the facilities, of the headquarters of the Sacred Union for the Nation. He spoke with the members of the Presidium quite naturally together. They talked about this government that will be published today until. Good morning, good evening. Good morning because it is already the morning of Friday, August 8, 2025. We are indeed live from the city of the African Union where the office of the President of the Republic, Oscar Mbal, is located. As you said, this news has been keeping the national public on tenterhooks since the last cabinet meeting, because during these weekly government meetings, the President of the Republic, head of state, Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, had, during his traditional announcement, said goodbye to a few members of the government. And since that announcement, this news has kept the public on tenterhooks with many questions. How many ministers will be part of this government? Because the aim of the ceremony is, among other things, to be able to strengthen the government team. As we know, the Prime Minister of Subine's team consisted of 54 members of the government, and the President of the Republic has made no secret of his intention to be able to strengthen it, so tonight or this morning, 48 members. We will know in the minutes to come, but in any case, tonight's announcement, there is more suspense, and it relates to the communication from the central government of the Republic. These are the changes because they are among the questions we are asking ourselves. Will the change also affect the head of government, that is to say the head of government? We will find out. In any case, no one knows. There is a lot of speculation. What will be the size of this government? Who are the newcomers? Who are the big departures, the permutations? All these questions will be answered in the coming minutes because in fact for a few hours. Since, in fact, already the beginning of the early evening of yesterday, so Thursday, August 7, 2025, the technical teams of the communications unit of the Presidency of the Republic, the teams of the spokesperson and those of the RTNC have been mobilized to follow this news, and all the movements are scrutinized. We have seen the Prime Minister going back and forth to the office of the head of state, and today is the epilogue of this long wait. In the following minutes, the spokesperson for the President of the Republic will have to read this presidential order which publishes the government. Up to Kusima, so that's the end of the suspense. Tina Salama, spokesperson for the President of the Republic, will make her exit shortly. She is currently in the office of the Chief of Staff of the President of the Republic. So we can see her with the files in hand. Exactly. So here, I see at the back of the screen, here is the shadow of the spokesperson. I think it must be Mrs. Tina Salama, the spokesperson for the President of the Republic, who will join us and who will appear before these offices for the publication of the government team. Ladies and gentlemen, take your pens and papers. You will have to write down the government team as decided by the President of the Republic, head of state. Mrs. Matina Salama is here, spokesperson for the President of the Republic. All these movements have been scrutinized recently, but today, she is wearing a folder. I imagine that this folder contains the government's list. Ms. Tina, you have the floor.
Good evening, everyone. Order number 25-247 of August 7, 2025 appointing Deputy Prime Ministers, Ministers of State, Ministers, Ministers Delegate and Vice Ministers. The President of the Republic, having regard to the Constitution as amended by Law No. 11,002 of the 20th of January 2011 revising certain articles of the Constitution of the 18th of February 2006, in particular Articles 69, 78 paragraph 4, 79 paragraph 3 and 90 paragraphs 1 and 3, having regard to Ordinance No. 2488 of the 11th October 2024 on the organization and functioning of the government, the methods of collaboration between the President of the Republic and the government as well as between members of the government, in particular Articles 2 and 3, having regard to Ordinance No. 2402 of the 1st April 2024 appointing a Prime Minister, having regard to Ordinance No. 24039 of the 28th of May 2024 appointing Deputy Prime Ministers, Ministers of State, Ministers, Ministers Delegate and Deputy Ministers, having regard to the consultations held and other exchanges with the nation's vital forces, taking into account the imperatives of efficiency, accountability, balance, political, geographical and socio-cultural freedom in the management of public affairs, in particular through an open government team, given the need and urgency, on the proposal of the Prime Minister, orders, Article 1. The following persons are appointed as Deputy Prime Minister and Ministers for the functions specified in their names: Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of the Interior, Security, Decentralization and Customary Affairs, Mr. Jacquin Shabanuko Bihongo. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Transport, Roads and Access to Landlocked Areas, Mr. Jean-Pierre Bemba Gombo. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of National Defense and Veterans Affairs, Mr. Guy Kabambo Muyavita. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of the National Economy, Mr. Daniel Mukoko Samba. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of the Budget, Mr. Adolphe Muzitu Fumashi. Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of the Civil Service, Modernization of the Administration and Innovation in the Public Service, Messrs. Jean-Pierre Liao and Bois. Article 2. The following are appointed Ministers of State and Ministers to the functions specified with respect to their names and persons. If after Minister of State, Minister of Planning and Coordination of Development Aid, Mr. Guilaniembo Bissia, Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Cooperation, Francophonie and Congolese Diaspora, Mrs. Therese Kaikumba Wagner, Minister of State, Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Mr. Mindo Nzengi Butando. Minister of State, Minister of Industry, Mr. Aimé Bogi Singara, Minister of State, Minister of Social Affairs, Humanitarian Action and National Solidarity, Mrs. Eve Baziba Massawi, Minister of State, Minister of Justice and Ranger of the Falls, Mr. Guillaume Kum Njifa Tondo, Atondoko, Andali, Minister of State, Minister of Hydrocarbons, Mrs. Abandambula Mbongo, Minister of State, Minister of National Education and New Citizenship, Mrs. Rawanga, Minister of State, Minister of Vocational Training, Mr. Marquiquila Licombio, Minister of State, Minister of Urban Planning and Housing, Mr. Alexis Gisaro Muvuni, Minister of State, Minister of Rural Development, Mr. Gregoire Mikhail Mouton Kingaji, Minister of State, Minister of Relations with Parliament, Mr. Guailo. Article 3. The following persons are appointed to the positions specified in their names. Minister of Finance, Mr. Dudu Fomba Likande. Minister of Public Health, Hygiene and Social Welfare, Mr. Samuel Roger Kamba Mulanda. Minister of Foreign Trade, Mr. Julian Palo Kayangia. Minister of the Environment, Sustainable Development and the New Climate Economy, Mrs. Marie Nyanje Nambo. Minister of Infrastructure and Public Works, Mr. John Banza Lunda. Minister of Higher University Education, Scientific Research and Innovation, Mrs. Marie-Therese Sambo Ane Safi. Minister of Employment and Labor, Mr. Ferdinand Masamba Wamasamba. Minister of Posts and Telecommunications. Mr. Jose Panda Kabangu, Minister of the Digital Economy, Mr. Augustin Kabasa Malaba, Minister of Mines, Mr. Louis Kabamba Wadam, Minister of Water Resources and Electricity, Messrs. Amolendo Sakombi, Minister of Communication, Media and Government Spokesperson, Patrick Muyaya Katambe, Minister of Entrepreneurship and Development of Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises, Mr. Justin Kalumba Mungungo, Minister of Regional Planning, Mr. Jean Lucien Baus Tongba, Minister of Tourism, Mr. Didier Mazenga Mukanzu, Minister of Fisheries and Livestock, Mr. Jean-Pierre Chamanga Wana, Minister of Culture, Art and Heritage, Mrs. Yolanda Ebe Madembo, Minister of Human Rights, Mr. Samuel Bemba Kabua, Minister of Regional Integration, Mr. Floribert Azuluni Mavati Kutombo, Minister of Land Affairs, Mrs. Sele Pimpa, Minister of Sports and Recreation. Mr. Didier Budimbu Tibwanga, Minister of Portfolio, Ms. Julie Mabui Chiku, Minister of Gender, Family and Children, Ms. Micheline Ambe Kalama, Minister of Youth, Ms. Gross Cotino. Article 4. The following persons are appointed as ministers delegate to the functions specified opposite their names. Minister delegate to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in charge of Francophonie and the Congolese diaspora, Mr. Crispa Bandu Pizot. Minister delegate to the Minister of the Environment and Sustainable Development in charge of the New Climate Economy, Ms. Arlette Bati Tito. Minister delegate to the Minister of Urban Planning and Housing in charge of Urban Policy, Ms. Anjali Bangasa Yogo. Minister delegate to the Minister of Social Affairs in charge of people living with disabilities, Ms. Irene N. Diata. Minister delegate to the Minister of National Defense in charge of veterans. Mr. Eliezer Tambue Kasongo. Article 5. The following persons are appointed as Vice Ministers in office. Mr. Elze Bokumoana Maposo, Vice Minister of the Budget. Mr. Elze Bokumoana Maposo, Vice Minister of the Interior, Security and Decentralization. Mrs. Eugenie Tella Kamba, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mrs. Noella Eganato Nakwapin, Vice Minister of Finance. Mrs. Gracia Yamba Kasadi, Vice Minister of National Education and New Citizenship. Mr. Teodoro Kazadi Muyila, Vice Minister of Customary Affairs, and Mr. Momi Ndeatorebe Jean-Baptiste. Article 6. All previous provisions contrary to this ordinance are repealed. Article 7. The Prime Minister is responsible for the implementation of this ordinance, which takes effect on the date of its signature. Done in Kinshasa on August 7, 2025, Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Chilombo UD Manoy Tuka Prime Minister for a certified copy of the original on August 7, 2025. The Office of the President of the Republic Anthony Kinzo Kamale Chief of Staff. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just followed the reading of the Rainier government. I submitted to you with new entries, in particular the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of the Budget. This is Adolphe Musito, former Prime Minister of the Republic, and today he was supposed to serve the country at the level of the budget of the Republic, and many entries Jakar Kusima. The size of the government has been reduced.
We are going to see it precisely with this number 6 Deputy Prime Minister in these governments that can be described as subminois of a single Deputy Prime Minister who is new. This is Adolphe Bosito, who joins the club of Deputy Prime Ministers, and it is precisely the Ministry of the Budget that becomes the Deputy Prime Minister's office, replacing the Deputy Prime Minister's Office for Planning, which is relegated to the level of the Ministry of State. So, this government has 6 Deputy Prime Ministers, including a new 12 Ministers of State, 24 Ministers, 5 Junior Ministers and 6 Deputy Ministers. So that's the size of the government. You can do the math yourself, but what we can see is that there are many ministers who have remained, but others have also been allowed to leave. And unfortunately there are some who have left the government. We will not be able to do all these analyses here and now, but we note in any case that the executives are there. There is a representation not only of political tendencies, but also of the openness that the President of the Republic had taken, which materialized with the entry into the government of Aldous Macedo as Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the Budget, but also Floribert Anzuluni. That was regional integration. He is the Minister of Regional Integration. Floribert, as we know, is an activist who worked in the youth movement in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Floribert Anzuluni was even a candidate for the presidency of the Republic in 2023, and he is among those who started the movement like Filimbi, who made people talk about it in the east and in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Perhaps a small detail. There is youth. The Ministry of Youth is currently occupied by Grace Coutinho. Grace Coutinho, who replaces Noah and Gunagato in this position, who was swapped. He is now the Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs. There have been many changes of position, such as Alexis Gasaro, who will be in charge of urban planning, while infrastructure will now be handled by John Banza, a new elected official from the province of Tanganyika. There you have it. A.B. Singara, who broke a record, in any case, like Jean-Lucien Boussa in this government, but this time with other portfolios. Moji Singara, for example, will be in charge of industry, while Jean-Louis Boussa has another portfolio. Julien Pelot is back, as is Markila Ray Malou Akasa Bandubola with a new portfolio. Evie Bazaiba, who is now Minister of State for Social Affairs, will be in charge of her sectors. Moin Donzangi remains in agriculture, and Therese Kaikwamba Wagner remains in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Samuel Mbemba, who was previously Interim Minister of State for Justice, of course, replacing Mamba, right? Who is currently being prosecuted because the trial is ongoing. Samuel Bemba has been transferred, and he will now occupy the positions or chairs of Minister of Human Rights. Gulen Nembo Miza, who was previously Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Planning, remains in the government, but he will also remain in his ministries, but is classified as a Minister of State. It is no longer a Vice Premier's position, so he is Minister of State in charge of planning. He retains his portfolio. Dudu Famba will keep the Finance Department while his deputy, the Snow, has been promoted because this time he is the Minister of Land Affairs. He is heading this large Ministry of Land Affairs, replacing Bandu Acacia, who also
has a new portfolio.
The position of Vice Minister, Don Janelle, will now be occupied by Mrs. Yamba, who is now Vice Minister, Grace Yamba, Vice Minister of Finance. Many people have disappeared in this category of Vice Minister. There are only 6 left. We can mention 6. Moin J, who remains in his portfolio, Theodore Kazadi in National Education, in Finance, it's Gracia Yamba. It's Noah A. Gunagato in the Interior, it's Gila. And then in the Budget, Elze Bokuwana. Elze Bokumoana. Who is Vice Minister, so who is in the Budget? Vice Minister of the Budget who will assist Adolphe Mazito. But it should be noted that, for example, Gregoire Mikhail, who was previously Minister of Agriculture, has been transferred. He will now assume the duties of Minister of Rural Development, and Mine Donzangi Minzangi will take over the Ministry of Agriculture. Another significant fact is that the government spokesman remains the same. Patrick Moya Katambwe remains in his Ministry of Communication and Media. He therefore remains the government spokesman. So Patrick Muyaya is there. He is the Minister of Communication and Media, government spokesman. And there you have it, the President of the Republic, Head of State, wanted to publish this government on Friday, August 8, 2000. He promised and he made other details on the analysis, the arrivals, the departures and as well as the new figures who have entered the government. Perhaps Guillaume Odimo has a few words to say before we part ways, because you have been following this publication with us, the publication of the Government of the Republic, a defunct government, we can call it the Sumina government. What are your observations after this publication by Tina Salama?
Yes. We are keeping 53 members of the government. There are 53 members of the government, Sumina 2, after Sumina 1 held 53 cabinet meetings, as did Ilunga Ilungumba at the time, and he Sumina 2 and Sumina 1, held 53 cabinet meetings. And now, 53 members have just made up this new team, for a different dynamic with the remarkable entry of Adolphe Mito. It was this opponent who rallied the camp of the fatherland, let's put it that way, so that we could look at this positive transformation of our society differently. We kept ministers who we knew, who worked very, very hard for the smooth running of the state, such as the VPM, the ET and the VP.
And now we will have other executives to discuss these warriors who were kept within the government. Thank you, Guillaume Matamola. I would like to remind you that you are the communications advisor to the President of the Republic, Giscard Auzima. We are landing. Yes, we will leave it to the editorial staff and the political forum to continue this analysis. In any case, as far as we are concerned, this is the end of a long suspense, at least for almost 2 weeks now, since the President of the Republic, head of state, announced the arrival of a new government. It's here now, we know, everyone is working and they will be judged on the basis of their results. Thank you to Giscard Auzima. Thank you to all of you who have followed us from all over the country and the world. The government is here, now is the time to get to work. Thank you to Poppy and Guillemot. Thank you to the entire technical team who allowed us to get to the next one. Thank you. Good evening.